In your prime, you versus Bisping, what happens?
I destroy him.
You know, the funny thing, this whole like Frank Dux versus Bisping, that was actually part of something much bigger planned. Like, do you think the fight would even last 1 minute?
No.
Not even close. In fact, you probably break a new Kumite record.
You broke the fucking world record! Yeah! My buddy!
But I'll just say there was a conflict of interest that happened, and I kind of had to bury what I thought was an insanely awesome idea that I will talk about some point in the future. So, you know, I don't know when, but I'll reveal everything someday. Hey guys, welcome to part 3 of Journeying to Frank Dux. Make sure to check out part 1, which was the Destroy Frank Dux, and then part 2, Defend Frank Dux, and then now the aftermath after having Frank Dux on the channel and the interviews and other stuff. This is the aftermath. What happened after that, right? I got a lot of flack, man. You know, looking back, it's actually kind of funny where I had so many comments. I had to put out like a statement, right? Just to like let everybody know that I'm not drinking the so-called Frank Dux Kool-Aid. Guys, just because I had Frank Dux on doesn't mean I believe everything he said. And that's not a shot against Frank Dux. Look, I don't believe everything anybody tells me outside of maybe my wife and my brother. But outside of that, you always got to remain like a level of skepticism.
If you're a spy, what are you doing on TV telling everyone you're a spy? The idea of being a spy is that your life is secret and nobody knows about it. So what is this?
Now, there are certain comments, oh, you're throwing him the softball questions and you're not questioning him. Look, even if I question him about certain things, he's obviously going to have a good response. And if you want to talk about like me questioning people, take for instance like the interview that I did with Michael Jai White. He was on DJ Vlad's show, and DJ Vlad said, hey, would you ever, you know, fight Mike Tyson? Would you box Mike Tyson? He said, of course I would. And then I asked him about that when I interviewed him, and he's I never said that, you know?
I said I would spar with Mike Tyson anytime. I would
more of an exhibition.
No.
If you got a call to do the next exhibition match with Tyson, would you do it?
Of course.
So it's like, even if you confront someone or ask them something, they could just deny it, you know? And then what are you going to do? It's like, I'm not going to get in a fight with them. Yes, you did. No, I didn't. Yes, you did. I'm not going to go back and forth, man. I'm not trying to make, like, an uncomfortable, confrontational interview with somebody, man. It's just like, who the fuck would come on the channel at that point? It's like, I don't want to go on that dude's channel. He's going to fight with me the whole time, you know? So I got to respect the answers they give, but I will try to make sense of it. So going back to that Michael Jai White interview, you know, I don't know how they edited the DJ Vlad. I mean, yes, he blatantly said, I would, of course I would. I would box Mike Tyson when he was asked that. So, but I try to make sense of it. You know, I could have got a lot more views on that video, use a certain title that I know people would click on and all this other stuff. But instead, out of respect and trying to make sense and giving him the benefit of the doubt with the answer he gave me, I had to, like, put in a little segment of sharing my thoughts of what I think he might have meant on the DJ Vlad show, you know, because again, I don't want any of my guests who are on to look bad, but it's not really up to me. Ultimately, it's going to be up to them. So anyway, check out the Michael Jai White interview and you'll see exactly what I'm talking about. So the funny thing is, like, Sheldon Lettich, writer-director Sheldon Lettich, actually made a comment and, you know, kind of mentioned, oh, who are you, like Frank Dux' spokesperson now? So I'm like, oh man, I can't have Sheldon thinking that I'm just completely sided with his, I don't know if I want to say Frank Dux is Sheldon's enemy, but those two guys aren't exactly close now, which is a shame because they used to be really good friends, right? And they worked on some amazing films together. But I had to address that. But Sheldon Lettich in there said, I've known Frank Dux since the early 1980s. Back then, he always presented that photo of himself with the medals as legitimate, and he claimed to me and many others that he was a Medal of Honor recipient. He even showed me the medal. When I visited the home of his former in-laws, when he was married to his first wife, April, they had that photo hanging in a prominent place on the wall of their living room, showing off their war hero son-in-law. I actually talked about this in one of my interviews with Viking Samurai. Now that Viking seems to have become Frank's spokesperson, I'm guessing he may have taken that interview down or done some editing. Well, you know what, Sheldon? That interview, that video is on the channel. All of the anti-Dukes content is on the channel. All of the pro-Dukes content is on the channel. And I think it is important to have a record and not scrub it. And people can see like the evolution if they want to look back at videos of stuff that I had related to Frank Dux and the videos now and maybe the videos in the future. So, I'm not his spokesperson, by the way, man. I am just a fair guy that wants to try to find out the truth myself. And, of course, I am using other things that people say, both good and bad, including stuff you said, to try to come to my own conclusion. But at the end of the day,
you may be able to help solve a mystery.
But just so you guys know, me and Sheldon are really cool now. We talk, we're fine, everything's good. He actually came back on the show, which was amazing. And Frank has his story how he saved Steven Seagal's life, by the way.
Right. Well, Frank has stories about all kinds of heroic deeds.
Actually, let me tell you how I met my Steven Seagal story, how I met Steven. Steven had just gotten together with Kelly LeBrock. Okay. And a guy walks in my school, and I kid you not, he had a briefcase full of cash. Mm-hmm. Walks in driving a Rolls Royce and wanting me to go basically hurt Seagal.
What's the motivation behind it? Like
jealous husband, because she was married to the guy at the time.
Oh, so Kelly LeBrock's ex-husband.
Well, I don't know if it was his ex-husband, but I'm telling you, that was what was going on.
Okay, so this guy was with Kelly LeBrock in some way.
Yeah.
Seagal and Kelly LeBrock hook up. This guy wants to pay you money to basically beat up Steven Seagal.
Well, not just beat him up. They wanted me to kill him.
So they put a hit on Steven Seagal.
Basically.
That's crazy. So what happened? So the guy comes with this money.
You got to remember something. You got to keep this in mind. I was working undercover at that time, and I had a different life. People saw me differently.
What did you have during that time that the special operations community would need? Legitly, what did you have?
Well, he won the Kumite.
So
the ultimate hand-to-hand fighter.
I'm just glad you're on our side, kid.
So this was interesting. Chris Flynn was commenting on different videos I did for like a year, and I'd always see his name pop up, and he'd say something about Frank Dux and all this other stuff. And I got into contact with him, and then he basically kind of sent me all of like his credentials and just so I could verify him. It's like, okay, look, this is not just some random guy who I thought initially was probably just some troll talking about Dukes, etc. But it's like, this is a guy who's got a military background, special forces, etc. And yeah, I figured, you know what? Let me actually hear from somebody in that area, in that field, that could comment on Frank Dux and the secret man stuff. But basically, in the case of Frank Dux, the Marine Corps, what kind of discrepancies are there? Because you don't necessarily believe the Frank Dux secret man stuff.
No,
based on what you know in your history in special forces.
Yeah, anybody that's worth their weight in salt or whatever. Yeah, it's absurd. It's crazy. Just the stuff that he comes up with. Number one, he was in the Marine Corps Reserves at the time, from what my understanding is, and I actually wrote down his dates on this paper. So I'm gonna move this over for a second. Let's see here. Dux Marine Corps is 1975 to 1981. Which is interesting and enough because SOCOM itself wasn't invented until 1987, and SOCOM is the top pyramid, part of the pyramid that all special operations kind of falls under. Frank Dux's time in the military was a 4-year as a reservist. Okay, that means 1 week in a month, 2 weeks a year. That's what a reservist is. It's the difference between active duty and reserve. Reserve means you're part-time. You're not a full-time soldier. Active duty, you're a full-time soldier. That means you're waking up every day and you're soldiering it out.
Let me ask you this real quick, Chris.
Sure.
Is it possible that somebody could be a reservist and they could be scooped up, into some kind of other secret operation type things?
Not at the time that Frank Dux was involved with the Marine Corps. No. And the reason why is because for well, number one, MRSOC didn't even exist. MRSOC started in 2006, I believe, for the Marines. MRSOC is the Special Operations Community of the Marine Corps. It's called MRSOC. So in the MRSOC, you have what's called the Marine Raiders, and then you have Force Recon. Both of those things, and any Marine in the comment section can correct it if I'm wrong. I wasn't a Marine, but I have a general understanding of how it works. So you have the Marine Raiders, which are the ones who do your direct action, kicking in doors, retrieving hostages, That's the Marine Raiders. And then underneath that, you have what's called Force Recon, a Force Recon element, which does recce. So they go out and they gather intel, they scope out enemy forces, and they report it back to the chain of command and let them know what's going on. So either one of those schools of special operations has what's called a pipeline of training. That means from the day you start training to the end of the time you finish your training, you're in a pipeline. Okay. And pipelines, I think for us, it was 56 weeks long. So you're talking 3 months of training just to be able to enter into the special operations community. Then once you're in the special operations community, there's a whole host of other training that you have to do as well. So your training just doesn't end when you're done your initial entry point. The training continues on. And there's no way feasible that this guy could have done any of this stuff within a 4-year block of time going part-time to the Marine Reserves. It's mathematically does not work out. And there's where the problem is. Not to mention there's a rank issue as well. A lot of these special operations won't even touch you unless you're at least an E4 or above. I think the average rank for special forces is like E7 to E8. So that's once you get in, which takes you years and years and years. And the other part of it is you have to ask yourself, what would Frank Dux have at that time that the Black Ops community or special operations community would even want? And that's one of the questions that nobody seems to want to ever ask Frank Dux. That would be my first question.
I got to have you debate him on a podcast if you guys are willing to do it.
I'm more than willing, because that's my first question to him. What did you have during that time that the special operations community would need? Legitimately, what did you have?
Well, he won the Kumite.
So
the ultimate hand-to-hand fighter.
I'm just glad you're on our side, kid.
Right. So if the CIA, along with special operations, ever needed somebody to go overseas and infiltrate some secret underground tournament, Frank Dux is the one that they would call.
Like Bruce Lee in Enter the Dragon, he's the guy.
Yeah, exactly. How often do you think the United States military is engaged in those kind of activities? How often do you think the United States government is engaged in those type of activities? It's absurd.
It'd make for a great movie, but yeah. So you basically definitely do not think he was ever in any like secret covert operations?
No. Professionally and personally, no.
Let me ask you this. What about, do you think he was ever a contractor for the CIA?
No.
Really? Why not? Not even like after his military time? You don't think they could have picked him up for some other purpose?
No. And the reason why I say that is, again, what does Frank possess that the CIA would want?
Let me ask you this. Now, this is a true story because the guy that told it to me, like, I have no reason to doubt him. And, if he ever wants to talk about it publicly, fine. I'm not going to say the name. But he told me, like, back in the 80s, Dux-Ryu school, they would have Nicaraguan soldiers go there to train. And he said, Frank Dux was amazing, like, with his knife techniques, which he thinks maybe he picked him up as a Marine reservist, or maybe I don't know where he picked him up, but basically he's legitimately teaching Nicaraguan soldiers, knife techniques.
Mm-hmm.
Like, why would these guys come to some random dojo in the valley to train with Frank Dux? And I think this was before Bloodsport ever came out, so nobody knew Frank Dux as like, the Kumite champion or anything.
Right. Well, number one, even if that would, let's just say that story is true, it's not that impressive.
Really? No?
No, it's not. And it's not for a variety of reasons. So I'll give an example. Today, right now, this very second, if you wanted to, you could literally call up over to the Special Operations Department at Fort Bragg and offer your services to go over there and train Special Forces soldiers. And they are more than likely going to welcome you with open arms because that's just the kind of people they are. They always like to bring in new stuff. So if you have something new that you can offer them and you're going to willingly give them whatever education, they're going to take it. So it's not unheard of for people to go over and claim that they taught special operations, taught Navy SEALs, taught Green Berets, taught, Delta Force, taught That happens all the time. And that's what I'm telling you. You could do it today. You could literally get up out of your chair right now as we speak, open your car, drive over to Fort Bragg, get a pass to the base, go over to the office, talk to the sergeant major and say, hey, look, I'm a badass. This is what I know. I know I'd be interested in showing my stuff to some of your soldiers if you'd let me. And not only would he probably let you do it, he could give you a letter afterwards saying thank you for your time and your assistance and and your contribution to whatever group, third group, for instance. And then you would leave with your little letter in hand, and you can go home, put that on your
I'm going to put it in the bookcase. I'm going to teach them I'm going to teach those guys how to do helicopter kicks.
Yeah, that's what, and that's what I'm trying to tell you. So that's how it was. So the martial arts isn't new to the special operations community. Special operations don't use it like that because on a battlefield, when and where you're going to find yourself in a hand-to-hand combat fight. You know what I'm saying? If you're in a hand-to-hand combat fight on a battlefield, you're in a world of hurt.
Yeah, you would
have weapons. You have weapons that you can shoot distance. Just think of like it would be such a waste of time to train somebody in all these different martial arts systems and styles that's going to go out onto a battlefield and get shot by a bullet from 500 meters away. You know what I'm saying? So why would you invest so much energy and time and effort into something that's just not practical?
The government has invested a lot of time and money in you. Uncle Sam can't afford to let you get hurt.
So that takes me all the way back around to the same question. What does Frank possess that any of these people would want whatsoever? Even if he was a good knife fighter. Let's just say he was. Let's say he's the greatest knife fighter on the world. Why the hell would the CIA want a knife fighter?
I don't know why they would, but apparently those Nicaraguan soldiers wanted it. But
he might have been a guest. Frank Dux could have been a guest at whatever this thing was, or he could have just freely offered his services, and they said, "Okay, sure, we'll go." Just like I said, like even an American military would do the same.
Mm-hmm. And then another thing that I think really separates my channel is like Phil Elmore, right? He was really critical of some of the stuff that I did on the channel related to Dukes.
I guarantee anyone listening to your show has read something that I wrote. If they read about self-defense and the martial arts, they just don't know that they did.
Speaking of which, real quick, Phil, and I wanted to address this. This is a funny segue. Let me just read you some of the comments you wrote about me. And this is also why I think this sets my show apart.
Yes,
I was. A lot of people. Let me read this for the audience. Phil. This is actually funny.
It was harsh.
I found this amusing. Okay, and I don't know where you said this. This must have been maybe some martial arts forum, maybe on a Facebook post. Viking Samurai has not only swallowed Dukes' BS hook, line, and sinker, but has also endorsed people like David Richardson, who is a dangerous lunatic who constantly threatens to murder people he doesn't like. I cannot take this fellow. I cannot take this fellow or his channel seriously. He has no judgment whatsoever. I'm just like, let me actually talk to this guy. Let me see why he thinks that. Let me just re-clarify my position of, I think there's some truth to Dukes, but I don't believe every single thing, because with extraordinary claims, you need extraordinary evidence or whatever the quote is. But you really just, in general, can't take everything somebody says by their word, right? Like there's got to be some kind of evidence of something. So, over time, as you get to know and trust somebody, maybe you could start taking them more at their word, right? That just naturally happens with any relationship you have with somebody. So anyway, it was interesting to see what Phil Elmore had to say about this whole thing. So Frank Dux, as far as I know, wants to have the martial arts world regulated. Like he doesn't like the fact that it's not regulated, which is interesting. Yeah, okay, that's your reaction. That's
bold of him to assume they would come down in his favor if they did. Frank lives in a world that is exclusive to Frank. And in that world, he is the single most accomplished, most record-breaking man of action and adventure who has ever lived or ever will live.
Just glad you're on our side, kid.
And the problem is that when you add up all of the things he has supposedly done, they are more lifetimes than a human being could live. They stretch credibility. Now, I say this as someone who has written 23, 24 books in an action series, The Executioner, which is the property on which The Punisher was kind of based. It's kind of ripped off from that. The Executioner action series was one of the groundbreaking pulp action series for men's adventure. Okay. It started in the late 60s, early 70s, and hundreds of volumes have been published about Mac Bolan, the Executioner, who, went to Vietnam, found out the mob figured indirectly in the death of his family, and said, well, I will kill all of the mob then. And then he did for about 40 books until the original authors sold the rights to Harlequin / Worldwide Library. With their team of authors, one of whom I was, they produced hundreds of volumes. And this guy was kind of a timeless 50 years old and just going on and having adventures to the tune of 700 books across all of his multiple series. If you add up all of the man hours that it would take for that one character to have had all those adventures, not only is he the single greatest mass killer who has ever lived in terms of the body count he has racked up, because these books are 60,000 words of walking into a room and shooting terrorists in the face. But he has lived more than a human being possibly could. And the only person I could compare that to is Frank Dux's opinion of himself. I've read The Secret Man, and as somebody who edits professionally, I can tell you that whichever editor, whomever looked at that book and from the first pages said, man, this seems plausible, should have been fired. Because it is obvious from the opening pages of that book that it is not just fiction, it is outlandish fiction of the style that we associate with fan fiction and other people who aren't that good at writing.
The CIA utilized Frank Dux' extraordinary skills around the globe. Dux gained legendary status on both sides of the Iron Curtain, even receiving the rank of captain in the Soviet Army.
A story like that's gotta be true.
It just... At the end of the day, my crime, like the crimes of so many people in Frank Dux' world, is that we looked at him and said, I don't think I believe you. And that was enough to end up on Frank's extensive enemies list for our entire lives.
Real quick, Phil, let me ask you this. Are you kind of like, do you consider yourself kind of like the Bullshido guy as far as what you're trying to do? Like you want to expose people like Frank and Ishida Kim, or do you even really give a shit?
No, to the extent I don't lie awake at night going someone on the internet is lying about their credentials, but I do care about things.
The martial arts police.
Yeah, exactly. I don't see myself in that role, and I think some people do get carried away with like martial arts fraud busting. I think I've even written an article or two about that, but I say that because I could fall down a flight of stairs and accidentally write an article. I spend so much time writing. I really just care about what's true, and when people lie to me, I don't like it. So I'm happy to call out the fact that I don't find this or that thing believable. Unfortunately, I also don't like bullies. So when people start bullying others because they're angry that their delusional architecture is being challenged, then yeah, that makes me annoyed. And I have tried to pull back from making new enemies specifically because it makes lifelong foes.
Oh, and then of course, Adam McKinley, who, he was with Frank Dux, then he had a falling out with Frank Dux, and then I think he's back with Frank Dux. I don't know, to be honest. But anyway, he makes a good point, despite whether he's associated and affiliated with Dux right now or not. He makes a really good point in this little excerpt here.
With or without your opinion about Frank, with or without your opinion to hate Frank, he is responsible for inspiring millions of people. He is responsible for making people get up off of the couch and do something positive.
I guess what I'm really proud of is that it isn't a story about violence. It's not, it's a story about human beings and faith and about determination and respect. And that's what I've run my life by, and that's what this movie's about.
He is responsible for giving people that energy and that vitality and that consistency. You cannot take that away from the man, no matter what you believe. It is not a debate. Everybody knows that everybody was watching Bloodsport, and if you were a martial artist at that time, if you were a kid growing up at that time, if you were a teenager, you loved that movie. That movie alone, more than any movie, in my opinion, is responsible for the martial arts being such a wide spectrum situation in this country. That's just my opinion.
Yeah, exactly. And it's kind of funny. It is that one movie, and it didn't matter if like another guy made 10 movies or 20 movies. It just, those all combined didn't have the impact that that one movie had.
Did it, man. And that's what's so, interesting about this whole Frank Dux concept is people need to give credit when it's due. And I'm even responsible for this, out of my anger and, out of my, my crap, my own personal crap. Like, I went after Frank as well. And, I said things that were ridiculous because you need to give this guy credit for the things that he's done for this community.
So Frank Dux, of course, worked on more films than just Bloodsport. A lot of the films had to do with Sheldon Lettich. They worked together. One of which was The Amazing Lionheart and also Only the Strong. That one starring Mark Dacascos. But a guy, a really great martial artist who was in both of those, Paco Prieta, I had him on the channel because it was interesting. Frank Dux had said Paco fought in Mexican Kumites. I think he said they almost actually fought together. So obviously I had to ask Paco about that. He said that you actually fought in underground fights in Mexico, like so-called Kumite matches.
Paco was Mexico's Kumite champion. He not only that, we almost ended up fighting each other.
Is that true at all?
Like I said, I fought the real fights, but it wasn't a Kumite. It was, when you live in Mexico City and you are with a beautiful wife, there's always sometimes people who disrespect you or and then attack you. So you had to protect yourself and react. And so that's the type of fight
like street fights, not competition fights, basically.
Yeah, street fights, right.
Interesting. So the plan is to have Frank Dux in a new interview addressing some of this stuff about the Mexican Kumites, stuff about Phil Elmore, stuff about Chris Flynn. Funny enough, I heard there was an HBO producer that wanted to get Chris Flynn and Frank Dux to debate each other. And that would have been amazing, right? I brought that up to both guys, but they both declined for different reasons. But I still want Frank Dux to debate somebody on this channel. That would be quite interesting. But regardless, we're going to address stuff that you've seen in this video with the new interview.